6 to 12 months that's really got you guys thinking differently for your clients today?
You bet. I always measure the sort of the change in these things by the questions that our clients are asking us. So only a couple of years ago, the question would be, can you give me more mobile? Right, which is a very media-specific question. Now they ask questions like, and it's still sort of wonky, but it's something like, how can I engage consumers who are on the go? Right? And it sounds like a small change, but it's actually, instead of talking about a medium, you're talking about content with engage, consumers, which is people, which is always a useful thing to talk about. And finally, on the go, which is a behavior, not a medium, right? What that means is that on our side, we have to restructure how we hire, how we're organized, because before, you could answer the first question by having a mobile team. So the answer to how to do more mobile, well, talk to my mobile team. Right here, they're called, and they were called Airwave at the time. But now we're structured to speak to the three pieces. So we have an in-house strategy team that's mobile focused. We have an in-house creative team who's mobile focused, and we have an in-house analytics team who's mobile focused. And so when we interview people, it's not just do you do mobile, but do you do mobile and I'm looking forward to whatever that next question is going to be. But yeah, that's just three groups right there. We already talked. We're talking to our third, or what's three up to three? Oh, fourth group, right? So we've got a fourth group that does the programmatic and the rest of this. So each of these trends ends up sort of creating another team that we have internally that allows us to continue to expand rather than just making a bigger mobile team.
That's great. Simon, you're on a ton of wins. What are people asking for on the new business front in the agency?
From our point of view, we're in the business of creating the content. So these guys are obviously in the business of distributing the content and buying the media where you're going to place it. But so what's shifted for us is the kind of content that we have to create. We call it, sounds a bit bizarre, but tent poles and tadpoles. And so you've got sort of the big campaigns, the big launches that you do throughout the year where you've got huge amounts of paid media behind it. They're sort of the tent poles. And so we need to continue doing those, but more importantly now is in the sort of the business of always on, in the sort of the owned and the earned space, is creating these small, more nimble, agile pieces of content that we call tadpoles. And like yourselves, we've had to shift in how we create that content, bringing in new kinds of people, but also becoming a lot more efficient, a lot more effective in terms of how we create that content. Rather than the big productions, how do we create those smallers through utilizing things like Vine or Instagram. And so just take, for example, Lowe's, and I'm going to show you an example now, is that they're in the business of home improvement. How can they make the homes and the lives of the people they're around better? And so those classic how-to videos that you'd see normally online on YouTube or what have you, we now created through clients. And it was a sort of an experiment to begin with. We created 6, we called it Fixing 6, but we're now creating over 100 of these, and we can create those for $1,000, $2,000 in our own nimble, agile production facility inside BBDO. So that's the shift now, is how can we create not just sort of the tent poles, how can we also create those tadpoles. And if you just want to play that first video, just to give you an example of these, what we've done. can see.
Right.
As you can see, it stays true to the essence of the brand. It's all about home improvement and self-improvement, and then thinking about how you can use these new technologies and these new platforms to then create this messaging in a much more cost-efficient and effective way.
It's amazing. It's such a huge shift from the big dollar productions to $5,000. It's probably even more impactful. That's great. Very cool.
All right. So you've asked about trends. I'm going to get out ahead of a trend and talk about an initiative that I think is going to be a trend, which it was probably about 5 years ago that digital first was kind of the buzzword that we were all hearing in the business. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about an initiative going on out of our Hong Kong office, so TBWA Hong Kong, where they've just recently kicked off a mobile-first approach to answering all client needs. Not to the point of force-feeding or doing something inappropriate where it's clearly not relevant, but because there's such extreme penetration in the Hong Kong market of smartphones and just mobile in general, by and large, every brief is being responded to with a mobile-first strategy. And interestingly, it's less driven by clients and client demand, and more sort of something that we've taken upon ourselves given the dynamic of the market. And again, it's really just in sort of its earliest stages, but I would fully expect that this idea of mobile first is something we're going to see more and more with most of our clients.
That's great. And starting in Hong Kong, because it's so prevalent. Very cool. Greg,
Hi.
what are you guys doing? It's exciting.
So, similar to what Ben was saying, what's interesting is that, many of us sat on panels like this and talked about the year of mobile coming, and the shoe dropped so quickly that the conversation really has shifted out of should you do mobile to how does it make everything better. We find ourselves, moving from a system of building media flowcharts to developing actual systems built around to find these different consumers. What's interesting about mobile, it's one of the very few pieces that's both having its own characteristics around proximity and transaction processing, but it's also the glue that binds all the other pieces together, right? And so I think that the right way for us to program mobile and think about it is that having it deeply embedded in the team as well as retaining some specialty in a group that we call connected platforms, because it's one of the few pieces that really does interconnect all the other pieces in the media systems.
That's great. You guys all kind of bring up people and new processes. It feels like back in the day when everyone was doing print and TV advertising, and then web came along and people just started throwing their TV and print up on the web. Now you have these new kind of people that Ben brought up and new creative. How do you think about this mobile standalone versus how these people ultimately be integrated into the whole experience? And you talk about mobile first, and you talk about the groups you have, but do you think over time this just becomes the overall communication? And what's the transition from mobile first and mobile everywhere? And how do you think about the people? That you have special people. Do they just grow into
Ben has many
regular
special
Ben?
people.
We only hire special people.
Hire special people?
I think that the change is going to happen most dramatically in creative, and that's the part that I would argue is broken right now, kind of on three fronts. The first one is that we still, in many, maybe most cases, we have our publishers making our creative for us. Give them some assets, we give them some direction. Hey, any one of these 40 players up here on the wall,
We'll do it for you.
make our ads, or weather for that matter, make our ads for us. And that's not to say those ads are bad. In fact, in some cases, they're wonderful. But to Craig's point, in talking about the year of mobile so many times, and now we're saying it's past, yet clearly our commitment is not there because we're still outsourcing the goddamn creative, which is the thing that people actually see. We would never ask ABC to produce our 30-second spot for Is Desperate Housewives even on? And no, it's not.
Remarkably,
Scandal,
yes.
Right? And so I think that it's just a testament to the lack of commitment on that creative side. And actually, I'd love Simon you to step in and tell me, why wouldn't you guys do the creative for us?
We'd love to. No, I mean, the way we don't look at mobile advertising the way I think that a lot of other agencies might do. We don't look at it as the canvas being these small banner ads. We look at it as a completely different, through a completely different lens. Our creatives like to create these amazing things, and they see mobile as a enabler to a better experience from connecting the sort of the virtual and the real world. And so we try to always push the boundaries from a creative perspective and see how actually mobile can actually bring to life another experience, especially you were mentioning around local. How can we make this thing become more interactive, more transactional, or more of an experience that leads to bigger connectivity with the brand, more talkability? I'm just going to show you something now we did for Pepsi. It's always best to show examples, right? Because if you don't understand it. And so for me, it's about how do you take this, what's normally a very boring billboard, and how can you turn it into an interaction, into an experience that gets the talkability around the brand. And this was basically something we did in London at one bus stop for Pepsi Max, and it just became this big sort of phenomenon. So I think it's about how can you look at the medium a little bit differently and add a much deeper level of creativity, but based around, once again, the idea or the concept or the actual strategy. So this is just something that we did for Pepsi.
I'm telling you, this is how it works, man. There's a little camera right here.
So once again, you can see how it connects into the brand strategy. It's a very simple idea. All we've done is taken over one billboard with a bit of an interactive camera, and it became a sort of phenomenon social. So it's about how you look at the medium. It's not through the traditional, banner ad and you're limited by the size of it. Think bigger. Think about how mobile can truly enhance and enable and amplify the world that you're living around.
So TBWA, obviously a creative agency. Let me talk a little bit about how we're tackling mobile from a staffing and resourcing standpoint.